My professional background and beginnings go all the way back to when I was 5 years old. I've always been fascinated by how things work, including everything around us in nature. When I was 5, I was designing rocket ships, not just pictures of them, but with places for oxygen and carbon dioxide. That may sound very old-fashioned now, but then very few kids were doing that. So I was always curious about how everything worked. And I read lots and lots of science. I did a lot of hiking in the woods, and I loved the outdoors and sound of birds. And I was always curious about nature. And my sister, who was in college, sent me books. She majored in biology, so she sent me all her biology books. So by the time I got to college, I knew the entire undergraduate biology curriculum. And so the teachers at college wanted me to major in biology because she had done so well. But I thought, this is too easy. I want to do the hardest thing I can think of. So I majored in physics. I went to my professors and I said, I really like science, but I hate being indoors. I want to be outdoors. I want to do science outdoors. And they said, there isn't any more science outdoors. So I believed them. Well, my heroes in my life, starting when I was young, were Joseph Conrad and Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. They were both adventurers. Conrad sailed, and Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince, flew, and they wrote about what they did. And I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be adventurous. I wanted to discover things. And I was fortunate because I had a science background. I immediately got a fellowship in science writing at the University of Wisconsin. And the fellowship involved me working as one of the reporters at the University News Bureau. Then another amazing thing happened. I married a woman whose father had 200 acres of land in New Hampshire and was a country surveyor. His name was Heman Chase. So he hired me to be his surveying assistant. And what we did was spend all day walking around in the woods. And so I learned a lot about how nature works. And my sister sends me this little book called Ecology, the first textbook, little textbook by Gene Odom. And I said, oh my God, this is the science I've been looking for. And I was advised to go get the advice of a professor, Murray Buell at Rutgers University, who was one of the few ecologists in the country. At that time, there were 5 professional professors of plant ecology in the United States, and he was one. And so he interviewed me, and he said, well, starting in February, I have a teaching assistantship, and if you want it, you can have it. And I said, well, that was pretty good advice. And I took it, and I got a PhD. But from what I had learned about how trees grow, there were lots. There was 100 years of people studying the physiology of trees and the taxonomy of trees. And I had learned that. And so I got this idea that you could write down mathematically equations that described how a tree grew. But of course, in that age, it had to be a computer. I was professor at Yale in the School of Forestry, now called the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. And one year, IBM made an announcement that it was going to fund 7 different projects that had to do with applying computers to social and humanitarian issues. And they came to the dean of the forestry school and asked if there was anybody who had any ideas. And there were 2 of their scientists who were really interested in what I had to say. One was named Jim Wallace, who was a forester and a statistician and really knew how to analyze data and how to construct the right kind of model. And the other was Jim Janik, a theoretical physicist who could program without ever making a mistake, to my complete embarrassment. And we took the summer as a project, and by the end of the summer, we had created a computer model that grew trees, and we tested it against trees. And this became one of my major life contributions. We named it Jaboa. This has now become an important part of my work because the science that I love so much, ecology, as you know from the newspapers, science about environment, including climate change, has become corrupted, and both sides are not dealing with it the way I believe scientists should. My father was the most important folklorist of the 20th century. He was called the Dean of American Folklore, and he had a personal collection of 12,500 books. He wrote a number of books, 17 books, and one of which, called A Treasury of American Folklore, was a bestseller. And in 2012, the Library of Congress had a display about the 100 books that had shaped America. And my father's book, A Treasury of American Folklore, was one of those. My mother had a different kind of influence. She strongly believed that in a person's life, there were three things that you should try to do. One is to be honest. Another is to be creative. And the third was to try to leave the world a better place than you found it. I played folk music in coffee houses, and I didn't pursue it as a major career, first of all because I couldn't get away from trying to figure out how nature worked and how everything worked, but also because I knew so many folk musicians who were such super musicians, and other musicians like my wife Diana, who's just an amazing pianist. So I made side money at this, but I didn't see it as a professional career. I saw it as a strong theme in my life. There are lessons I would pass on to the future generations, especially right now, because everybody is always talking on their cell phones and taking pictures and movies and typing little messages and games, but they're not talking to each other. No thinking has necessarily been involved. No serious discussion. It isn't Washington and Jefferson and those people, or Abraham Lincoln. So my hope for the future is that people do return to thinking and writing. I would like what I've written to be something people read and value in the future. And I would like to be remembered as somebody who thought science and the arts, including the appreciation of beauty everywhere in nature and in human-built things, that I be remembered as a person who wanted to do those and wanted to do what my mother said, be creative and try to leave the world a better place.
Never mind. My trials, Lord.